first batch of Gaza pilgrims left the coastal enclave Monday morning to Egypt via Rafah border crossing. There, they will be transferred to Mecca in Saudi Arabia for the pilgrimage known as Hajj via Cairo airport the same evening. About 800 pilgrims gathered at Al-Katiba Square west of Gaza at 6 o'clock in the morning and were transferred to Rafah border crossing in special proposed buses.
I registered for Hajj 7 years ago. Thank God I was lucky to get the chance for Hajj this year. I thank the Ministry of Waqf, the King of Saudi Arabia and Egypt for helping us.
The Egyptian authorities announced earlier that Rafah terminal will exceptionally be opened for 3 days on the 7th, 8th and the 9th of September to facilitate the transfer of Gaza pilgrims to Mecca and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, the Minister of Religious Affairs of the Palestinian Authority, Youssef Hadais, said that about 6,000 pilgrims from the Palestinian territories are planned to perform Hajj this year, pointing out that there were a lot of facilities offered by Egypt and Saudi Arabia to ensure their trip.
This feeling cannot be described. God has destined us to perform Hajj this year. It is a divine grant. Thank God that after 7 years of suffering, registering, paying the fees, getting them back and waiting for the next year, we were honored with this generous trip.
The Hajj begins on the 8th of the month of Dhul Hijjah on the Islamic calendar, and it is one of the greatest occasions in Islam. It is also considered the largest gathering in the world, where some 2 million Muslims from every spot of the world who can afford to do so arrive in Mecca to perform Hajj at least once in their lifetime. Nuharazin, TeleSUR TV, Gaza.
The main conclusion made in the 500-page independent report that the 43 Ayotzinapa students were not incinerated in a garbage dump in Cocula, Guerrero, contradicting the official investigation, is of no surprise for many in the streets of the Mexican capital.
Many of us believed that all of this was manipulated. Well, not necessarily manipulated, but there were lines of inquiry that have not been investigated.
I think the entire chain of power needs to be investigated and they need to be punished. It doesn't matter what level they are.
Maybe they have them hidden somewhere and they apply so much investigation and spend so much money to cover up one lie with another.
While the demand of the families of the youth to investigate the role of the federal police and military in the forced disappearance of the students has been consistently denied by the authorities, the independent investigators affirmed that these security forces were involved.
According to documents in the official investigation through surveillance video, state and federal police, as well as the army, all had information on what was happening.
Meanwhile, the reaction by the federal government to the independent report has been cautious, reaffirming the position that the students were incinerated, but yet the authorities will re-examine forensic and scientific evidence and continue their investigation.
There will be a solicitation of a new forensic investigation through a collegiate team of forensic investigators of the highest prestige.
However, in a press conference by the families and classmates of the disappeared youth, the question into the motive of the crime circulates. Some analysts point to a missing bus used by the students and erased from the official investigation as key.
In one of the buses that were taken, there may have been a lot of heroin or opium that made the attackers block the road that exited Iguala. It is hard to explain the action in other way. It was too violent and too aggressive.
Finally, the families of the victims continued their demand for the return of the students, as well as a meeting with Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto and the permanent presence of the independent investigators until truth and justice is served. Clayton Khan, TeleSUR, Mexico City.
To transform people's sorrow into something more positive is Luz Adriana's main goal. Known as Dr. Clown, she has been bringing relief to children under medical treatment through clown performances that use laughter as a therapy, something she's convinced can also help to transform societies.
We want people to live in peace. Our aim is that people experience happiness, and in that way they develop resilience to reconstruct a country after years of war. Beyond speaking, it is time to make peace.
Dr. Clown performances are part of Colombia's Week for Peace activities, aimed to actively engage civil society in peace construction, but also in the discussion on the nation Colombians want to build once an agreement to end the armed conflict is reached.
That's what we have been longing for 50 years. I am now 53, and my wish that my son gets to experience a country under peace. My hope is that the new generation, the coming ones, get to know a different country in which people relate to each other in a different and peaceful way.
As organizers and participants of this week activities have expressed their support for the ongoing peace negotiations in Havana, also they believe that beyond the agreements between the government and the guerrillas, peace is ultimately constructed among civilian population in their territories.
We need to create a reconciliation environment where we can recognize each other without hatred, where we Colombians can re-encounter once again. And that's where forgiveness, understanding, truth, and justice play a central role.
Meanwhile, the discussion on truth and justice, one of the most pressing issues among the parties, seems to be moving forward in Havana, bringing hope to those that have always advocated for political negotiation as the only way out of Colombia's armed conflict. Natalia Margarita, TeleSUR, Bogotá.
Public healthcare workers have launched a 24-hour strike from Wednesday to pressure the government into following the agreements made in 2014. At the time, the government was forced to sign an agreement with the workers after an 18-day-long strike. The agreements included 18 points, such as giving the large number of temporary employees permanent status, increasing personnel, and raising salaries, but only the agreement on expanding bonus payments to the majority of workers has been implemented.
The situation of health workers, of professionals in health services, is critical because we receive remunerations that do not go in accordance with family needs, do not go in accordance with the responsibility that we have, and the work we do, or the professional training we have undergone.
A number of workers also marched to the Ministry of Health, demanding their issues are heard. However, the ministry will struggle to fulfill the demands since its budget is being reduced by the Ministry of Economics, and in addition, the number of patients it is supposed to cover has greatly increased.
For the year 2016, the government is proposing a budget for the health sector slightly lower than the 2015 one. But the problem is that during 2015, millions of people have been incorporated in the integral health insurance of the Ministry of Health, and this puts us at a severe contradiction affecting the inclusion, especially of minors, school children, pregnant women, and dispersed population.
Critics to the budget cuts predict that patients will lack access to medications. Newly incorporated populations will be frustrated by the absence of services, and the needed infrastructure works will be suspended, leaving the public healthcare system at a critical state. Rael Mora, TeleSUR, Peru.
Under the impact of the photos of people dying and the boats that arrive daily on Europe's coasts, the European Commission has announced that they have recorded more than 800,000 refugees this year alone. The question remains, why now? And what is the reason behind this staggering number of refugees, which the world hasn't seen since World War II?
We see the flow of refugees and their difficulties from Syria to Turkey, then to Greece, the dangers they face at sea and then on to Hungary, Austria and other countries, and we see how expensive the asylum process is for those countries. So we have to ask, instead of pouring money into humanitarian aid organizations, why don't these countries stand side by side with the Syrian government against the main cause of all this, which is terrorism?
International organizations say that the largest number of refugees, 34%, come from Syria. Some analysts see these numbers and timing as a political rather than humanitarian. They say the aim is to increase pressure on the Syrian government and to legitimize a military intervention in Syria under the pretext that the government is unable to protect its people from terrorists.
What is happening today is absurd. The West sees the Syrian crisis as similar to the division of Yugoslavia. What they want is to use the large number of Syrians who are fleeing as a pretext to create secure areas in the north of Syria, saying they cannot accommodate such numbers. The whole issue is politicized, with just a humanitarian mask, especially since the international community isn't helping Syria to face terrorism, in spite of the daily reports of killings and the destruction of our history carried out by terrorist gangs. They are not treating the disease, just the symptoms.
Terrorist activity is the main reason for the departure of Syrians from the country, by spreading fear through beheadings and displacement of minorities. And these extremists are now a threat to the same Western countries that nurtured them. Hazratullah, TeleSUR TV.